I'm Aaron Baylock, and I'd like to walk you through my final project for ENME 489Y remote sensing. This project deals with the topic of lidar. And you might ask, what is lidar? And I could go into great depth and tell you all kinds of interesting science, but you'd be bored. And you'd probably close the tab and block me on Facebook and all the other social media and call my grandma and tell her I'm a jerk. And let's avoid that. Let me go with just a very basic explanation of lidar. What lidar is we shoot a laser beam at a target and use that to create a digital image on a computer. It has many applications, from simply scanning an object to later 3D print, also to do an autonomous vehicle so it can navigate through its surroundings on its own without hitting any objects. And there's also aerial photography can be used to determine the topography of an area. So lidar has many uses, and if this at all sounds interesting to you, you can continue with the video and we'll see where we go.
The primary motivation behind this project is to get out and have some real-world hands-on experience with remote sensing, and particularly lidar. We'd like to ultimately scan all of our campus down here at the University of Maryland College Park. Here we see my commute every day from my parking lot all the way to my classes. This takes me by a Testudo statue that's out in front of the football team house, and I thought probably this had been missed by prior students in the past and might be a good addition to our overall scans. It is on a pedestal and has a lot of detail and should make it a perfect target for lidar scanning.
Here we have the lidar rig. The whole thing is supported by an adjustable tripod that goes from a level of about 2 feet all the way up to almost 6 feet. On this tripod we have a 3D printed mount. It interfaces with the tripod here, and it holds all of the components that we need. The major component here is a battery pack that supplies power to all of our other components. Here is an old phone I'm using to tell me the level at which the laser is pointed. On this side, you can see the line laser. This is powered from the Arduino. That's the Arduino's sole purpose here, is to power this line laser. Up here we have a Raspberry Pi. This is a strong little computer, and this is used to process all of the images we take. You can see here that there's an 8 megapixel camera that takes the pictures and puts them into the Pi. We can then connect to the Pi from a computer that's on the same network. And that allows us to manipulate the data that's on the Pi and to also manipulate the code that we have installed on the Pi.
Remote sensing is the act of collecting data about a target without physically interacting with it. We can do this passively by taking an image, or actively by doing something like shooting a laser beam, allowing it to reflect, collecting it with a camera, processing it on a computer to create a digital image. This, in essence, is lidar. In our system, we're using a laser pointer as the transmitter and the camera as calibration of the line laser was accomplished using the staff in the upper left corner. Various distances were measured, and the graph in the upper right corner was produced, and then a correction factor was applied to get the graph in the lower right corner. Seen here is the process of collecting lidar data with the line laser. Each image is taken at a different angle, and when the image is produced, that angle is written on the image. Then we are able to process those images further to create a point cloud ultimately. Here we see the Python code processing the images we created earlier. To do this, we had to isolate the red line laser using HSV values. And then moving into the MATLAB, it takes the text file produced by those values, and we are able to then process that into a 3D point cloud, which is displaying on the screen now. And this shows us the rendered image that we have created from the data we took using the lidar. Here I am, finally out scanning my target Testudo. This first evening featured a lot of challenges, the first being the rain, which I overcame with umbrellas and the help of my lovely wife. The second was that it was dark and Testudo was not very reflective, so I had to use a longer exposure. On my second visit, it was bright. These lights I had not anticipated on my previous visit were now much brighter. The long exposure I needed to use on Testudo then did not work on the pedestal, as it just washed on out, and I was unable to see it. So I had to use a short exposure on the pedestal itself, and then once I got up to Testudo, I used a longer exposure to capture the data that I needed. Other than that, it went pretty smoothly. I was able to collect the data normally with a remote connected computer. My laptop was nearby, and I just collected each side and moved the camera angle by angle for approximately 30 degrees and collected everything we needed. Okay, so I've finally finished doing all my scans of Testudo. I have all my images prepared. I've used a naming convention of AI for alignment images, and then underscore, and then backside, front side, left side, right side. They're all in here. They're not much to look at in this form, but they're there. I used Color Picker and scanned each set of images to make sure I had a proper range that would just encompass that image, because each side was different due to the ambient lighting available. Through data generation program, I was able to then make a text file out of all the data points for each side. There was no additions here, just straight data as per the program. Over in MATLAB, I modified the program slightly, importing each set of data separately. Assigned each set of data its own XYZ coordinates. Went ahead and I plot those with PC show. For each one, I just added onto the code that was there. The same thing down here for the point cloud. This final cloud here, just adding onto the same data. The differences I had to do because of the left side and right side, where I had to flip a little bit of the data, like for example this one I had to flip it, but also because I didn't actually measure my distance from the target ahead of time, I had to do some alignment, which is what these pluses and minuses are throughout, to align the sides together correctly. So if I go ahead and process this, it'll take a minute before it shows up, but we'll be able to see the point cloud that I was able to make. So here we have the point cloud. This one over here is just a blue mess because it's showing literally all the points at once. It's very hard to parse what is actually happening there. This one on the side view, that's obviously Testudo, but the one we really would like to look at here is this Testudo in 3D with the colors, which really helps us to see it. And you can definitely see there's a full 3D Testudo. And this is the one I stitched together. You can actually make out there's a leg, there's a leg, there's a leg, there's a leg. Here's the upper part of his shell. I definitely have his head, and we can see that all around. His tail is a little lost, but it's kind of there. There's obviously some artifacts from the stitching together of the pedestal. It's a really wide pedestal for this Testudo, so the lasers, as they approached Testudo, left a lot of interesting lines as they got closer. So the pedestal wasn't my target. That wasn't what I was trying to resolve. The Testudo was, and I think that has been achieved fairly well here. Now, moving on to the generation of the mesh, I first start in MATLAB and use a command called dlmWrite to output the data I had generated previously. This I import exactly into MeshLab. At first, it has a lot of noise, and you can barely see it, so I change the color. Following that, it's time to compute the normals. And here I use a neighbor number of 1. Higher numbers just did not work for me, so we went with a 1 to get the normals all in the same direction. Following that, we use a screened Poisson surface reconstruction. I found that there was diminishing returns after a reconstruction depth of 11, and then I used a minimum number of samples of 20, and this is the hot mess I got. I had previously created another point cloud, and I had cleaned up all the mess. Having done that, I was able to produce these surfaces, but I don't feel that they were that much better than the other one. These were the absolute best meshes that I created out of many attempts, and there we are.